think that screen is washed out.
So it's not these.
Turn down the slider just a little bit. Better.
Yeah.
We're gonna get started in just a few minutes, everybody. Thank you. Pen oh one. Right, all set? Okay. Over here is me. Everybody, thank you for coming. My name is Sean Driscoll. I'm the communications director here at the Steamship Authority. I think everybody knows everyone, but just for the record, I've got Bob Davis here in the blue and Mark Rosen in the white, our treasurer controller. And also in the room, but off camera, is Courtney Oliveira, our assistant treasurer. So what we're going to do is Mr. Rosen's going to give a brief presentation on the budget, proposed budget and proposed rate adjustments. And that'll just take a few minutes, and then we're going to leave the bulk of the time for questions from you, which you can submit when we're done through the chat function, or do you hit the raise your hand icon and I can bring you over and you can ask question on audio or video, whichever you prefer. We'll go till at least 10:30 and longer if there are enough questions, but we guarantee at least half an hour of time here if people do come in late. So I think with that, we will get started. So let me bring this over and share my screen. Okay, and we'll get started.
Right to number 2.
Oh, yeah. One other note as well. I am recording this session. So just to let you know that if anyone else is recording, you're free to do so. You don't need to notify me as you do during the meetings, but we are recording the session on our side. Okay, Mark, up to you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Mark Rosen. I'm the treasurer of the Steamship Authority, and got a couple brief PowerPoint presentations to go over the proposed 2021 budget. For this year's budget, we're using revenue assumptions based on the actual 12 months prior to COVID, which would be March 2019 through February 2020. Previously, we'd be using, or historically, we'd be using the traffic figures, the most recent 12 months prior to the budget being prepared. Using these figures, we're assuming 90% passengers carried of that time period, as well as the cars parked in the parking lot for revenue sources. We're assuming 100% vehicle traffic for passenger cars and freight. And these patterns are similar to what we've seen since July through October, but the passengers right now at that time period are about 75%. The operating budget on the expense side is based on 2020 with no material changes outside of the maintenance costs, which we'll get into a little bit later. So what we're looking at is with the budget, we have $112 million in operating revenue, just under $113 million in operating expenses, other income of about $2.7 million, other expenses of about $3.9 million, which brings us for a net loss for the proposed 2021 budget of just under $1.4 million. And this is contributed by the Nantucket route has income of about $168,000, and the Vineyard route would have an operating loss of about $1.5 million. Okay, so these are the changes that we're looking at on the operating expense side for the coming year. Depreciation expense up about 1.1 million. This is primarily due to depreciation costs associated with bringing the assets online with the Woods Hole construction project. General expense looking at about 660,000. The main driver on that is the health and welfare costs. Operation of vessels, we're looking at a decrease of about 650,000. Main driver on this is expected fuel costs. These are looking at the projected cost of fuel next year, as well as the hedges we've put in place. And for those of you who are familiar with what our fuel hedges are, that's basically like insurance, is where we have the right to buy the fuel at a certain price in the future. Additionally, we're looking at maintenance costs being down about $200,000. Main reason why looking at a decrease is last year we had about $1.2 million worth of engine overhauls for the IANO, and this year we will not be incurring that expense. Other items on the maintenance expense side, we're looking at dry docks for 5 vessels, which are listed there on the screen, for a total of about $4.8 million. Additionally, last year we had engine part expense of about $2 million, versus this year we're budgeting about $950,000, and that is, again, as mentioned previously, related to the motor vessel IANO's engine overhaul that we don't need to do this year. Dolphin and dock repairs, we're looking at budgeting $2.4 million, which is up $1.2 million from the previous year. Main drivers on this is work at the Oak Bluffs terminal dock, about $1 million, as well as refurbishment of the North Transfer Bridge at the Nantucket terminal. So this is where we look at what we're projecting the changes in our operating revenue compared to the prior year's budget. And again, we are using the pre-COVID traffic levels and assuming passenger ridership of 90%, as well as parked cars, and the vehicle revenue will be derived off of what actually traveled during the last 12 months pre-COVID. That being said, we're looking at passenger revenue down about $4.5 million, or 13.7%. Parking revenue down $1.4 million, or 19%. Freight revenue down $300,000, and automobile revenue down $100,000. Okay, what this chart shows is where we have a net income and a net loss per month. That's the red bars indicate the monthly operating loss, and the green indicate the monthly operating income. And the blue solid line shows the aggregate net income or net loss at that point in time for the year. So as you can see, for 7 months of the year, January through April, then again October through December, we operated at a loss, while May through September, we have net operating income. Us, with many other people in the transportation industries, have had to deal with the impacts of COVID. Back in April, our passenger ridership was down 82% for the month. Automobiles were down 77%, and trucks were down 58%. Since then, we've seen these numbers improve, and for the month of September, passengers were only down 15%, automobiles were up 11%, and trucks were up 4% for the month. And since July through September, we're looking at passengers roughly around 75%, and automobiles and trucks on average are pretty close to even with the prior year's traffic levels. Okay, why are the rate adjustments needed? This is, most of this is directly related to the impacts of COVID-19. Of the $8.7 million in rate adjustments, 5.9 are related to the 90% traffic forecast for the passengers and parking statistics. Additionally, we're looking at vessel dry dock sometimes as far as 18 months out, where things change in the repair schedule. So where do we go? So looking at the bottom line, we're targeting a net income of about 7.3 million, which is consistent with the previous 2 years. Prior to any proposed rate adjustments, we have a net loss of 1.4 million. To get us to 7.3 million, you're looking at adjustments of about 8.7 million, of which 5.4 would come from the Martha's Vineyard route and 3.3 from the Nantucket route. So looking at the adjustments we're proposing, in all vehicles outside of the peak pricing, we'd be looking at roughly a 7% adjustment. So the standard vehicles would be account for 3.5 million. The excursion fares would be 720,000. Vehicles over 20 feet in length, i.e. freight, would be about 1.7 million. Passenger fares, both in the conventional and high-speed boat, would account for 2.4 million. Parking permits would account for 100,000. And miscellaneous increases, which is really barge revenue on the Nantucket run, for 240,000. As mentioned previously, we're looking at the vehicles being adjusted by 7%. So looking at the normal standard fare vehicle under 20 feet in length, that equates to $4 to $6 one way on the Vineyard route, excuse me, $4 to $6 one way. With the exception of the peak pricing Friday through Sunday, they would see a similar adjustment as last year, $15, and that accounts for $2.5 million in adjustments. The excursion fares each way would be adjusted to $2.50 in the off season and $3.50 in the summer season. The freight would be seeing a 7% increase depending on the size of the truck. Passenger fares would be $1 for a single ticket, $8 for a 10 ride, $17 for a 46 ride, and parking permits would see an adjustment of $50. On the Nantucket route, similar to the Vineyard route, the vehicles would see a 7% adjustment, which equates to between $11 and $16 one way. The peak pricing on the Nantucket route would see a similar adjustment to the previous year of $25. Excursion fares would be adjusted by $6 to $8 one way, $6 in the off season, $8 in the summer season. Freight vehicles would see 7%. Barge fees would be $2 a ton. Passenger fares would be adjusted by $1 on the conventional ferry, similar to the Vineyard route, and $3 on the high-speed service. And similar to the Vineyard route parking permits, the Nantucket parking permits would also see an adjustment of $50. So looking at the excursion rates, for those who aren't familiar, it's a round trip that originates from the island with a return ticket back to the island within 31 days after the first segment of travel. The round trip rate includes 2 adults and 2 children. And looking at this, we adjusted that rate 7% overall, and the cost of the vehicle compared to a standard fare is roughly a 75% discount. What this chart shows is the correlation between the revenue generated by the different types of vehicles compared to the occupied space for each route. The blue pattern shows the MV revenue for each category compared to the blue solid is the amount of deck space they occupy. The red pattern for the Nantucket run is their revenue, and the solid red is the spaces on the Nantucket route. So for instance, the excursion fared vehicles in the Vineyard route account for 16.6% of the revenue while using 29.5% of the space. And on the Nantucket route, that is 8.6 and 15.5 respectively. And then if you look at the standard fare vehicles, the automobiles, they bring in 57% of the revenue while using 47% of the space. On the Nantucket run, it's 41% of the revenue and 29% of the space. What this chart here shows is a breakdown of what percentage of the proposed rate adjustments each category would be accounted for. So the passengers would account for 28% of the proposed rate adjustments. The standard fare vehicles would be 20%. The freight would be 20%. The premium pricing would be 19%. The excursion fare would be 8%. And the miscellaneous, which is the parking permits and the barge fees, would be 5%. This chart is similar to the one we just showed previously prior to the rate adjustments. And with the proposed rate adjustments, we would still have a net operating loss in 7 months, and we'd have net operating income during the months of May through September. And that concludes the presentation, and we'd be more than glad to answer any questions.
Okay, if anyone has any questions, you can either type them into the chat feature or hit the raise your hand icon, and I can bring you over so you can ask questions via audio or video. Any other points you want to do?
So in terms of the 2021 operating budget, the biggest driving force of the budget is the operating schedule. And the schedule that's proposed and been approved for 2021 is the same schedule, effectively the same schedule that was originally approved for the 2020 calendar year, and essentially the same as what we operated in 2019 for the operating schedule for both routes. So as Mark pointed out earlier, back in April, May, we were able to make adjustments based on the traffic volumes that we were seeing for savings in terms of consolidating services and things like that. But the driver of the budget is the operating schedule, and that operating schedule is based on the expected vehicle demand. And as Mark pointed out, the 2021 operating budget is based on 100% of the pre-COVID vehicle traffic for the year.
So this year, not only did we scale the quantity of trips that we ran based on vehicle demand, we also scaled the types of vessels we ran. So sometimes we replaced the larger vessel with a freight vessel where we didn't have any walk-on traffic, but we still had the vehicles. Other times we might have ran the Island Home and not the freight boat in the afternoon with the extra capacity of the Island Home and the lift decks.
So while we're waiting, if anyone has any questions, one of the other things that's been pointed out in the past has been a concern that we're overstaffing our vessels, too many people. There are requirements that Coast Guard has on our certificates of inspection on how many individuals need to be manning the vessels. We're basically at those manning levels with a couple exceptions. For instance, the freight boats require the gay head and containment do not require a chief engineer on board unless we're carrying hazardous. And since those boats are considered the hazardous vessels, we need to have them on board. The INO does not require a pilot on board the vessel unless we're operating above 30 knots or above. And in order to maintain that schedule, it's 32 knots. It operates at 32 knots. So it's effectively a requirement. We also feel it's a best practice to be having chief engineers in each of the engine rooms for safety and reliability, and as well as 2 licensed deck officers in each of the bridges.
Okay, we've got a couple hands up. Leon Braithwaite, our one of our new commissioners.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
With respect to the manning, does the union contract ask you to have additional people on board in some of the instances, or is it all just driven by the Coast Guard?
The union contracts that we have, we eliminated the minimum manning requirements in those contracts. However, we do, again, the licensed deck officers, for instance, all the vessels require 2 individuals, with the exception of the INO, and it's only if we were to run under 30 knots. So we feel it's a better practice to have 2 people on board in the wheelhouse the agreements, we want to man each of our vessels with a chief engineer on board. We do have latitude. So for instance, in the summer times, we do add ordinary seamen to, for instance, the Martha's Vineyard or the Island Home, just to make sure that the cleaning is being taken care of during the voyages.
And the other question I had, when Mark, when you showed those two charts about the loss and the income, do you have what the net differences with the increases, what the bottom line number would be there? It might have been in your presentation earlier, but I saw the two charts and it showed the positive months and the negative months, but after you put in the fare increases, what does it do to the numbers?
Sure. We go from a net operating loss of just under 1.4 million to a net operating income of 7.3 million. So you're looking at about an $8.7 million difference.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Leon. We've got Jeff Christone with his hand up. Jeff, you can go ahead.
Thanks, Sean. Hi, Bob and Mark. Thanks for taking my question, and also thanks for having this public session.
Morning.
You had, before the pie chart, you had a graph that showed the revenue in the deck space for both the excursion rate and for regular fares.
Yes.
Okay. It would be interesting if we could go back a couple of years to see the impact on that deck space as you went up on the regular fares, especially when you introduced peak pricing a couple of years back. I would assume that number would probably stay pretty stable, if not go up, which is an indication that we haven't priced ourselves out of the market yet for that peak pricing. And my other point was, being a port community here and also owning a lodging house, we encourage during the July and August periods a 3-day minimum. And I'd really like to see the steamship get online with the peak pricing to be a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and not just a Friday, Saturday. So that would skew your revenue. I would assume you're not pricing people out for a Thursday. You're certainly not pricing people out for a Friday, Saturday with your past peak pricing. And I'd like to see when you can run some models before your next meeting to see if that would actually impact. I know it would impact in a positive way your cash flow and your revenue stream there.
Sure. So if I can take the first part, is this year we're seeing it. 2020 was the first year we had the peak pricing model in place. Okay, so in this year we're seeing the standard fare vehicles up while the excursion fares are down since July. So it really hasn't impacted, to your point. We haven't seen any softness in the standard fare vehicles, since July.
Great.
Yep. So, and then the other one is on looking at some quick notes, and I believe the number on Thursday, you're looking at roughly 16,000 vehicles on Thursday for the peak pricing for the Vineyard route, and about 2,500 to 2,700 roughly on the Nantucket route. So on the Vineyard route, it'd be about a $19 adjustment per vehicle. I'm just doing quick math here. So you're looking at about a $300,000 adjustment of additional revenue by changing Thursday to a peak pricing.
It's pretty significant.
On the Vineyard route, and about 70,000 on the Nantucket route. I mean, these are rounding numbers and I'm doing math in my head, so.
Yep. Thank you. I mean, I think that's something that we should look at.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank
Thank
you.
All right, we've got Caroline Hunter with her hand up. And Caroline, you also submitted a question via chat, so we'll answer both of these.
Yes, hi, good
Hi
morning.
there.
Good morning, good to see you all again. What's the annual ridership on Martha's vehicle vessels? In other words, I take multiple trips, but I want to know how many different riders do you have in terms of vehicles?
In vehicles or
Yeah,
passengers? So the budget projection for 2021 is that we expect to carry 2,439,000 passengers to and from the vineyard. About 416,000 automobiles and 142,000 trucks.
okay. And so how many people are on this meeting, please? This chat?
Right now, we're at 10, including us.
Okay, and then we only had 9 yesterday. I would encourage you all to please alert the public of this change. It's significant for people, especially people who are daily commuters and workers. Thank you.
Thank you.
For Larry's question, do you have senior ticket pricing in the offices off island? How much will they be? Since the regular fare is going up $1, the seniors would go up correspondingly 50 cents.
Can you talk about the qualifications of that senior fare? I don't think everybody knows necessarily what it is.
Okay, the senior fare is that you need to be a resident of one of the port communities.
There's an application to fill out. You can get it at one of the terminals or online.
Or you can show your driver's license with your residence in one of those communities.
Okay. And I'm not sure, Larry, what you mean by, does Nantucket have a 7-day minimum for cars?
There's no minimum turnaround time.
Yeah, or parking or anything. So I'm not sure what we're referring to on that. So I apologize.
Okay, Larry's got his hand up. I'll bring him over. Hey, Larry, do you want to talk?
Yeah, you can hear me all right?
Yes.
What I meant by the 7-day turnaround for automobiles is many years ago, I had heard that Nantucket was having visitors with their automobiles. They could not come over unless they had a 7-day reservation somewhere. So they couldn't come over for the day with their automobiles like they do here on the vineyard.
Yeah, I haven't heard of that in 25 years here. Bob, have you heard of it?
No.
No. And it would be really hard to enforce because you might have a consultant or a worker going over who needs their vehicle compared to someone who's traveling for pleasure.
Okay, so there's nothing like that. Thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Any other questions at this point? Well, color me surprised. Mr. Salzberg,
Hello.
knock me over with the feather. Go ahead.
I was wondering if you folks could illustrate, I'm sure there's an economic reason behind it, why you don't run boats past the 9:45 run, like why they don't run farther into the evening, especially for freight traffic, and why, is there any conceivable way that could ameliorate the need to raise rates?
Well, the schedule's predicated on requirements in terms of vessel crewing, in terms of how many hours they can operate. So if we were to operate later in the day, we either have to start later in the morning, or we'd have to bring in an additional crew, which would cause additional expenses. Over the years, we've been looking at trying to optimize the travel times that people want to be traveling at. When we moved some of the trips earlier in the day, it benefited the islands in terms of being able to people to be able to get off island to do their shopping, to get to their medical appointments, and travel. The later trips in the day generally are the trips that don't have as much demand as those morning and afternoon trips.
Yeah, Rich, if you look at the 9:30 trip, I'm sure you've been down there at that time of night, that boat's generally pretty empty, as compared to the corresponding trip to bring it over, is very full, where the islanders are going back and not a lot of people leaving the island at 9:30, arriving in Woods Hole at 10:15. So if we did add extra trips, it's really going to be directional traffic one way.
Understood. One other quick question. I heard you talking previously about minimum crew complements for vessels. Wondering if you could speak to whether or not the minimum requirements for vessels based on Coast Guard regulations dovetail with the minimum crew requirements from the International Maritime Organization.
We're required to adhere to Coast Guard manning requirements, so.
Well, I just did recall that Mr. Amundsen had been trying to align the Steamship Authority more with IMO standards.
The regulatory agency that controls our manning is the Coast Guard.
You can follow up.
Yeah, I mean, as far as what the differences are between the two, Rich, you could follow up with me offline if they're, I don't, because we're not beholden to that organization. I don't know that off the top of my head, but if that's something you're interested in following up on, you can email me after.
Sure thing. Thank you.
Thank you. And Jeff Crystal is coming back. Jeff, go ahead.
Yep, like a bad penny, keep on coming up. I just wanted to comment on your expansion of the operation if, as Mr. Salzberg mentioned, going later hours or such, has a direct impact on the town budgets as well. In Tisbury, they try to commit police officers to direct the traffic off of the property and through 5 corners. So it's more than just, an impact on the Steamship Authority and their increased crewing costs, et cetera, et cetera. It's also on our infrastructure here over in Tisbury and our manpower on Tisbury as well, And I would assume same for other communities.
Yep. I agree. And oftentimes you'll see us, later in the evenings with some of these freight boats, and some customers will reach out to people. If the vineyard side, and this is going to tie into Carolyn's question coming up as well, is if we can fit everything on a freight boat on the big boat, we'll not run the freight boat and consolidate it all into one trip to save both from an economic and environmental standpoint. And sometimes, Caroline, the traffic is directional, is that people who live on the island come off in the morning, they might have a medical appointment, then they maximize their time off island to do some shopping, visit whatever friends, whatever it may be. And when they come back to the island, we have a lot of demand later in the afternoon and evening, where coming off the island, we just don't have that demand.
I don't know that everyone could see Caroline's question. She noted that she's been on vessels where there were less than 10 cars and asked how we could manage to make that happen less frequently.
No, and that also happens Sunday mornings in the wintertime sometimes, is that Sunday morning, you don't have a lot of people heading back to the island, where an island resident, for example, in January, spent the night overnight Saturday, and they're going to get as much done since they're on that excursion ticket on Sunday and going back later in the day.
So the seasonal demand that impacts that as well, in terms of, beginning of the summer, end of the summer, more demand to be going in one direction or not, so.
And on the Nantucket run, we did implement a while back some peak pricing on some trips coming late at night during the middle of the week that weren't utilized. Trips were underutilized for the standard fare vehicles.
And that's why we also have the ability, while we run the published schedule for the larger vessels, the freight vessels, we don't put those on the published schedules. So that way, if there's an opportunity to consolidate traffic onto other trips, so that way we can save the fuel costs, we do so.
Sorry, Jeff, I left you hanging there. Did you have any other questions, or are you all set?
No, I'm all set. Thank you.
Thank you.
Leon?
No, he's just hovering. We hit our half an hour mark, so if there are any other questions, we'll certainly take them at this point, but otherwise.
I think it just, in terms of the process here, we've presented a draft of the proposed operating budget and the proposed rate adjustments to Port Council and to our board at last month's meetings. We'll be going to the Port Council and the board here in November to seek approval of the budget and rate adjustments. So this has been helpful for us to hear what some of the concerns are, in terms of our budget, our operations, and what we're looking at in terms of the rate adjustments. So, and hopefully this has been helpful to everyone that's in attendance.
And Caroline, in response to your question about how can customers access this broadcast, I will post both today's session and yesterday's session on our YouTube channel later today, so people can watch them. Rich, one more?
Hi, thanks. One last question. I was wondering if you'd realized any cost savings perhaps from the printing and processing of tickets since you've rolled out e-ticketing, or if you haven't, if you anticipate there may be some savings on those categories based on the wireless nature of it.
Yeah, so the volume right now, Rich, I mean, the passenger numbers are dwindling, not dwindling, but they're decreasing, just because of the time of the year. So I would expect next year we would see some savings on ticket pricing. I think Courtney, focus tickets like a penny, maybe, paper ticket. So it's, it's a volume issue. So we're hoping to see some next year.
It's Rich, it is primarily done to try to give our customers an opportunity to less points of contact in terms of interfacing, particularly in a COVID-19 environment, to eliminate as much of that as possible, and also to be able to, have it right there on their device as to, what they have for tickets and know what they have to use. So.
And then the next step would be rolling out the coupon books, and as convenient, where, for instance, the students, when they go back to school, it's much easier for them to have their phone, or any other customer, than having to bring the phone and the plastic card as well. And the goal would be able to share the shareable cards, like a 10 ride that's shareable, to have it on two devices where, say, for instance, my wife and I could have the same 10 rides on two different devices.
Thank you.
Caroline had her hand back up.
Caroline, did you have a question?
No, you all answered my last question. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right, in that case then, thank you all for coming. We'll post this, as I said, on our YouTube channel later today. Bob's email, Mark's email, my email are all on our website if you have any further questions. And then, as Bob noted, we'll be presenting this again to the Port Council at their meeting scheduled for next Tuesday at 10 a.m. And then the board meeting is scheduled for October 17th.
November 17th.
At 9:30. So thank you for coming, and everyone have a good day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.